Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to Iron Anchor Cycles and part one of what is going to be hopefully a pretty cool series on tearing down this 883 Sportster, cutting it in half, and hopefully building a pretty cool chopper out of it. If you watched the previous video, and I will leave a link to it right up here, you can see the excitement, if you will, of going to buy this bike and bringing it back to the shop. And I've got it up on the lift here now to get started for the very first time on doing anything with it. Really haven't even ridden the bike. My intention was to take it for a ride, at least give it a shakedown, make sure the motor and transmission were good, but it snowed this weekend. It's freezing cold outside. It's about, 8 degrees today. We've got at least a week of more temperature like this, so I'm just gonna get started and just start tearing this bike down. I don't wanna wait. I wanna get going with it. I'm antsy, so we're gonna make this happen. So what are we doing here? We are doing a chopper, an Evo-Sportster chopper. If you are into this sort of thing, you've probably seen a million of these before. There's a million videos on doing this, some good, some bad. I mentioned in the last video, I've got a little bit of experience with this, but I'm by no means an expert on the chopper thing or the fabrication involved. So I like stepping outside my wheelhouse and my comfort zone a little bit just to build something cool. And the icing on the cake for me is it's just a bike that we can kind of keep around. That's a 100th anniversary bike that I've always kind of wanted to have as just something here at the shop. I think it's really probably the only significant anniversary Harley's ever going to have. All these ones they do now, 105, 110, 15, 20, I think it's all pretty meaningless. And I don't see Harley getting to 200. So I think the 100 is probably going to be the most significant one they ever have. So just wanted something we could have. So what we're going to be doing in this first segment is basically tear down. I've been thinking about what we want to do and what I'm trying to kind of put together here, and I've got some parts kind of started to pile up here. Still got to get some more as we figure more out along the way. But I've been thinking about what is going to be kept off this bike and what's not. And the list of what's going to be kept is pretty short. So kind of starting at the most simple, the wheels I'm keeping, the front half of the frame I'm keeping, the tank I'm keeping. I might try and redo this on a different tank, but for the moment it's staying in the keep pile. The motor is being kept, although we're going to tear it apart and we're going to do a build on the motor. So that'll be a whole other chapter of this series, is doing the build on this. The goal here is to take this anemic 883 Sportster and turn it into something hopefully that'll do 90 horsepower, maybe a little bit more. I don't think we'll get to 100, but talk more about that when we get to the motor stuff. But so motor being kept, and that is just about it. Well, that's not true. Keeping the triple trees, keeping the fork lowers, keeping the brake calipers, some other little odds and ends here and there. But in terms of stuff that we just kind of need to start stripping off and put in the very big takeoffs bin, handlebars, controls, gauge, pipes, controls, fenders, seat, oil tank, all the lights, all this stuff. So a lot of stuff that's got to get stripped off and then ultimately get the motor pulled out. So that's what I'm going to be working on today, is basically taking this bike apart, and we'll see how far we get. So I'm excited to kind of tear into it. So let's not talk anymore. Let's start tearing this bike apart. First roadblock. Can't get these screws out. All right, let's get something else. Kind of funky, never seen that before. This little rubber piece on the inside of the air filter. Anyway. I think that's kind of cool. I might keep that for something. We'll put this air cleaner on meant business. All right, carbs off. Looking a little dirty. This will be a little side project for us to get this thing rebuilt, cleaned up. So, a moment, put this aside. So I think this badge, this emblem, is really cool. I'm not sure if I can find a place for it in this project, but I'm definitely gonna keep this for something. Yeah, see, it's cool, right? All right, well, this might explain part of the reason why this bike won't start. It will start, obviously you saw it running before, but the battery is totally pooched, it's totally shot. I've tried conditioning it, recharging it, it just won't, just doesn't have enough to crank the bike over. But given that this battery is too small to even fit in this spot, it doesn't even appear to be the right battery, so maybe that has something to do with it. But we need something else for our project anyway, so no big deal. All right, turns out there wasn't very much fuel in here, which is a good thing for us. Well, ground wire disconnected, vent, air line, vacuum line, fuel line. That's all I gotta do. These come right off. So put this down, keep rolling. All right, well, I was gonna kind of explain what I was doing here a little bit, and I got to a point we kind of got to pause here anyway. So obviously the first parts of what I was doing there was here, that's better. So the first part of what I was doing, all that disassembly, it's all pretty normal stuff, right? Like things you would do for your typical, you know, installations or stuff like that, right? So tank removal, air cleaner, forward controls, pipes, all that stuff, pretty normal. We're starting to get more into the like bigger disassembly here. So I'm not doing this in any particular order, just kind of whatever strikes me next as like, looks like the next thing that, you know, could come off pretty easily is kind of what I'm going to. So obviously what I've started doing here once I got the tank off is stripping the harness off. Now, obviously you could come through here with a set of wire cutters and just start cutting this thing to shreds. There's no reason to do that. It's really not that difficult to get this harness off intact. And number one, it has some value. You might need it for something else, you know, another bike that needs it as a reference, whatever. It's worth saving it. The other thing is, you know, who knows? You might want to use this harness for the build. We're not going to be doing that. We have our own, you know, sort of custom simplified harness we're going to do. But I still want to try and get it off intact. So in any event, the steps here for getting this harness apart, I was just kind of going about it as I found plugs. I found the turn signal plug here. It's one of those doubles where you've got the right and the left together in one plug. That's sort of annoying. Obviously doesn't matter to us, but just worth noting. I was buried sort of all the way back here. I came up and I saw a plug, which was this one tucked under the headlight visor, and I thought this was going to be, I thought all the plugs might be under there. This was just the Speedo gauge assembly harness, which obviously is what that is. The others, all this whole harness goes inside the headlight, so all your connections are in there, similar to sort of on the older bikes where the headlight bucket acts as a junction box. So I didn't realize that was going to be the case on this bike. So No big deal. Just gonna have to take the headlight out and then we'll have access to all those plugs and then be able to start pushing some of this stuff back. It might be a bit of a pain to get some of this wiring harness out of the headlight without, we're gonna have to depin it and whatever. So I might not do that right away, but I'll at least get the headlight open so I can see what we're working with. And then we'll just keep carrying along. I think once I get the harness as free as I can up here, I'll probably start either go to the stripping the bars next or coming back here and getting the fender off and then starting to deal with some of this stuff here. We've got some electronic stuff here, fuses, whatever. We've got the oil tank to deal with, the battery box. So all that stuff's got to come off. So just keep plugging away. This is kind of fun, actually, doing the disassembly. You're just, just unbolting stuff, taking stuff off. It's a little cathartic, actually. Okay, so I got the handlebar switch harnesses unplugged from here, and there's a big hole with a big grommet to get those out. These other ones all come through this one little hole here. So I think what I'm gonna do is, rather than take the time to depin all these plugs and sort of lose track of all of it, I think I'll probably just leave this here for the moment and I'll just take it off as one piece. When eventually we get around to taking the top triple tree off, I'll be able to just slide this over and I won't have to worry about it. Or who knows, maybe I'll be able to pull the harness through the other way. I don't know. So for the moment, I'm just gonna let this sit here. I'm gonna throw a towel on this fender just to protect it. I guess I could take it off. But in any event, let's maybe move towards the back of the bike. I don't know, we'll find something to do. Okay, well, I've got the back end of the harness mostly disconnected here. I did have to go over to the other side of the bike and disconnect this plug, which runs, I believe, I actually don't even know. This might be for the stator, I have no idea. Voltage regulator, yeah. Anyway, got mostly everything done, got this wire disconnected. This is the main harness pickup off the positive stud of the starter. And I've got a couple wires here left hanging me up, and it's just a couple of grounds, and they're underneath the engine mount bolt. Well, not really, there's sort of double nutted situation here. But I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull this oil line here. This little T job is not something we're gonna reuse. If I get it out of the way, I can probably get a wrench in that nut and get the rest of this harness freed up, and then pull it all out through the triple tree. So I am gonna attempt to do this. I did already drain the oil tank, but there's certainly some residual oil left in here. So I imagine we're gonna get a little bit of a mess here. These little grounds would have been very tempting to just cut, but I've made it through this whole way without cutting anything except for actually one wire, but I cut it because the plug is the plug going into the starter, and I want to keep that plug. I don't want to leave it with the harness because I'm going to reuse it. So I managed to do this all without really cutting anything. So I decided, let's go all the way. And there we go. Harness is free. All right. All right, there it is. Fully intact Sportster wiring harness. Let me get a little bit cleaned up here, put some of these, reorganize these tools and throw out some of this trash and get back to our disassembly. All right, so the next couple things I wanna do is I want to get this rear fender off. I also want to get the rear brake setup off. So for the rear brake, we are going to be reusing the caliper and the master cylinder, but not this line. So I could, disconnect the line and take all this all off individually because we're going to have to disconnect it anyway. But I'd rather it not all sit around leaking and dripping everywhere. So I'm going to attempt to take it off kind of all as one piece. So if I unbolt the master cylinder from here, I'll be able to pass it through the middle of the bike and take it off with the caliper. Obviously, to get the caliper off, I need to take the rear wheel off. Taking the rear wheel off also makes getting the fender off a lot easier. So we're probably going to wind up putting the rear wheel back on so that we can roll this thing around, but maybe, maybe not. But in any event, rear wheel is going to come off at least temporarily in order to get fender off and get the brake setup off. There we go. All right, all that bumping around was me just trying to get this caliper freed up. Okay, so with that out of there, pass this belt back over to the outside, and we should be able to get the wheel out. Not really a big deal. Get that off in one piece. Okay, so what do we want to do next? I guess rear fender time. I guess that makes sense. So we've got a couple of nuts on the inside, and then there's a bolt up here in the front. Goes up to this nut here. So should be able to make pretty quick work of it, I would think. We need like a T, I don't know. That one looks like a Torx. That one looks like maybe it used to be a Torx, but it's now mostly round. I don't know. Let me grab some wrenches. Yeah, that is totally stripped. Rounded over. Not sure what I'm going to use to get that. We'll have to come up with a plan. That right there is the first really rusty bolt I actually found on this whole bike, which is pretty impressive. So I got all the other ones broken loose except for this one, which I've got the right size wrench here, but it's just totally rounded over and it just keeps camming out. But it's definitely also rusty. So let's try and help our cause here a little bit with some Croil. See if we can get that to do anything. I don't really remember how these work either. I feel like I need to, I don't know what I gotta do. I want this to slide out. There might be a nut on the inside of this cover. I think there is, if I remember correctly. So we might have to pull the shock bolts out. I really don't remember. I haven't done one of these Sportster tail sections in a while. I did one not that long ago. I had to replace a turn signal for somebody, but I know there's this is like a weird stud with like a mid nut in it. But anyway, let me see if I can get this bolt out. Actually, let's go this way. Oh, there we go. Well, got it moving anyway. Let's see. Maybe I can use the socket now that it's broken free a little. Oh yeah. I think the Croil definitely was the savior right there. Because this one's turning a lot easier than the last one did. Boom, there we go. All right, so we should maybe be able to get this out. I don't know. I think you might have to Might have to take these side covers off first. We'll find out. Mile of threads on this. There we go. Look at that sucker. Like 2 inches long. All right. So, you know what? We're probably not supposed to be able to do this, but I think we'll be able to get this fender out. All right, let's see what we can do here. Oh wait, duh. Obviously we're not gonna be able to pull the fender out because the turn signal wires are going through it. Okay, I was just getting ahead of myself right there. Okay, let's get that figured out. All right, who of you caught that before I did? I hope somebody left me a comment going, hey, dummy, you're not gonna be able to take that fender off with those turn signals there. Okay. Ow. Ow. Yeah, all right, so I'm just gonna, to hold this in place, I'm just gonna throw these nuts back on the turn signals. All right, so what we gotta do is take the shock bolt off. So we'll do this one side at a time. Let me grab a wrench here. Take the shock bolt off, take this cover out of the way. Yeah, all right, now I'll be able to pull this off and this through. And I don't remember if this plug fits through this hole or not. Hey, look at that, it does. So this is what I was talking about. The way these turn signals are connected, you've got a stud that starts here, but it's got a nut, you know, built into the middle of it. Sorry, I'm not sure if you can see that. So you tighten the turn signal onto the strut with this, so that would get tightened down, and then you'll tighten the nut onto it to attach it. So if I back this out, you'll see that's what I'm talking about. So this is a weird little thing. It can be difficult to replace these turn signals with anything other than factory because of that sort of weird mounting arrangement. So let's see. This is probably the one hole of all of them that this plug doesn't fit through. Yep, doesn't fit. All right, so with those covers gone and the turn signals off, should be able to get the fender out now. I just slid these 2 screws back in here to hold it temporarily. So we should be able to slide this out. And there we go. So what's left on here is obviously the harness that we unplugged from the main harness. And then right here, I believe this is the ignition. Maybe. Or maybe this is a turn signal module. I don't know. Truthfully, I don't know what this is. We'll find out. I'll let you know before the video is over. But anyway, we're not using this for anything, so I'm gonna go put this down and we'll see what we want to do from here. Okay, so from here, I've got a couple more things I want to remove. We are just about ready to get the oil tank off. I want to get the sprocket cover off, and then a couple of the accessories off the swing arm, the belt guards, this passenger foot peg, and also we'll get this exhaust bracket removed. So I guess I'll just sort of work my way forward. Getting the oil tank off will be a little bit easier with the sprocket cover out of the way to cut these little compression fittings. So maybe I'll start with the sprocket cover and then we'll kind of knock everything else out. So see what I need to do here. All right, so that probably has a nut behind it because I'm not able, it's sort of just spinning. I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly there is. So just need to take these 1/4-20s out and it should pop off. Yes, indeed. All right, so there's a nut back there. This doesn't actually go all the way through. All right, so let me put this aside. And I think, let me do the belt guards in this bracket and then we'll come back to the oil tank last. How about that? I guess, actually, I'm not even gonna take this lower guard off. And I gotta take this back off, because that's how you get the belt off. Forgot about that one little step. All right. All right, so we will not be reusing this, so I could have cut it, but I don't know. I'm in the mindset right now of not wasting things that are perfectly good. So that is just about everything minus the oil tank, I guess. So let's get these fittings or these clamps cut off here. All right, so at this point I should be able just to undo the little nuts on the other side and the oil tank should pop right out. So it should just slide right out. There we go. Oil tank out. Well, this is starting to look like something now, you know what I mean? All right. I think at this point, we are pretty close to done with the kind of initial disassembly. Obviously, the motor is kind of the one big thing that is still in the frame. And for today, I'm gonna leave the motor in the frame. Obviously, we're gonna have to get this thing down to a bare frame to cut it. But really my goal for today, it's about, I don't know, it's 5:30 right now. My goal is just to kind of get this, everything else stripped off and kind of get it down to a roller. And then maybe take care of the motor another day. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's gonna be one video or two also, by the way. So I guess you'll just have to see if this video keeps going, then we're pulling the motor in the same video. If not, then maybe we're not. So we'll see what happens. All right, new day, new energy. Let's get this motor pulled. So as this sits, you could absolutely pull this motor exactly as it is. You know, with the starter, with the primary on, all that stuff. Don't need to do any more of this disassembly. All we have to do is disconnect the motor mounts here, 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 and here, and we'll be able to pull the motor. In our case, and that would be what you would do, by the way, if you weren't gonna do any motor work and you're just taking the motor out of the frame, that's why I mentioned that. In our case, I am gonna be doing some motor work, so doing a little bit more disassembly on this isn't gonna hurt anything, and we'll just make it maybe a little bit lighter. I'm not trying to disassemble the whole motor while it's sitting in the frame, but there are a few things I just kind of figured would be easier to do while it's still in the frame versus once I get it out and on the workbench. So a couple little things like I do want to take the starter off because I want to be able to get under and in here and clean all this. Unlike on the big twins where the bolts for the starter come through on this side, on the Sportster, looks like they come through from the inside of the primary, so we'll have to take the primary cover off to get the starter off. No big deal because that gasket's leaking anyway, so that's something I was gonna change. We're going to be doing a chain drive on this, if I didn't mention that before, which means this sprocket needs to come off. This nut can be a bit of a bear, and not to say we'd have any issue doing it on the workbench, but while the motor is still here and held really well by the bike, getting this nut undone and getting this pulley off wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Trying to think what else. Eventually, we're going to be taking the top end apart. We're going to be opening up the cam cover. All that stuff, I think I'll probably wait until we get it on the workbench for. And truthfully, just to keep things protected, I might just put the primary cover back on once we take the starter off. You know, no gasket or anything, but just get it cleaned up a little bit so we drip as little as possible, and just do that. The other thing is I do want to leave the bars on the bike because obviously that makes it, at least while it's still a roller, makes it easier to move around. But I will drop it down and take off some of this tertiary stuff we don't need. Obviously our switch pods can come off because we've got the wiring undone, turn signals, mirrors. We'll just start taking off anything we don't need. You know, we can take the, gauge assembly and all that off. Could just leave it on there just because, it's holding the handlebars on. But in any event, cross that bridge when we get to it. So I think for the moment, what I'm going to do is, I don't know, maybe let's start with the handlebars. Let's start up there. I'll lower the bike down. We'll strip off what we're not going to use up here, and then I'll bring the bike back up, deal with whatever I want to deal with on the motor, and then we yank this motor out. All right, so this should be pretty straightforward, just kind of stripping some of this stuff off here. I'm going to start with the mirrors and turn signals, then we'll get to switch pods, that stuff. See where we go. Okay. So I mentioned before, they do this on a lot of Harleys. This is a silly design, connecting the left and the right turn signal together into one plug. Number one, it makes it hard to tell which one is which, but also permanently marries these things together in a way that's just inconvenient, in my opinion. Okay. All right, turn signals, ready to go into our takeoff box. All right, grab our mirrors. These will not be going back on, but there's always a use for the teardrop Elite mirrors. Find myself needing these from time to time, so keep these aside. All right, and I guess let's do, well, as long as we're over here, we can get the clutch cable disconnected here. We're gonna take it off on the primary side as well. This is another thing, a lot of times people pull the motor, they'll leave the clutch cable connected to the motor, just so they don't have to disconnect it down there and they sort of have it flopping around. I'm gonna replace it, so might as well take it off now. That was a little tight. All right. Okay, cable should not be tight like that. Once you break that jam nut loose, you should be able to move that adjuster by hand. So obviously, not in our case, it doesn't really make a difference, but it's just worth noting, I guess. And get our lever out. We'll not be reusing these levers. I don't like these silly holes they put in these sometimes. Find something else to go on here. All right, so with the clutch cable free here, it'll be ready to disconnect when we get down to the bottom. Just tuck that in there for the moment. So from here, I'm gonna remove the clutch perch. And finally, the switch pod. All right, then our grip's gonna slide off here. Left side, obviously good to go. Move her over to the right side. I hadn't really planned on taking the caliper and brake assembly off right now, but I guess there's really no reason not to. It's not like we need a brake on this thing to roll it around the shop. So I guess that said, we'll do the same thing on this that I did on the rear, and we will take the master cylinder to the caliper, that whole assembly, off as one, so we don't spill any brake fluid anywhere. So let me start by undoing the intermediate fasteners that hold the brake line in place. You got one on the top triple tree, one on the bottom. Once the line's free, we can disconnect the master and the caliper, and we'll just kind of snake it all out. All right, so with our line free, get the caliper off. All right, and let's get the master cylinder removed. All right, master and caliper off as an assembly. All right, go put this aside with our other one. All right, let's get this other pod off along with our throttle cables and grip. All right. All right, grip in the box. And throttle cable, switch pod into the box as well. All right, we are rocking and rolling. Before I grab this and get a handful of grease, let's just wipe these off a little bit. All right, so last piece for up here is I'm gonna leave the bars and the riser and this top clamp in place. I'm just gonna pull the speedo off and then I'll just put these bolts back. All right. Now, we got ourselves totally stripped here at the top. Let's bring the bike back up and we'll get back on getting the motor out. All right, so basically what my goal is over here to get done is I wanna get this clutch cable off. I wanna take a look and see what's going on inside the primary, and I wanna get the starter off. So before I open this up, I'm just gonna remove this clamp for the clutch cable. Okay. So I guess first step is gonna be, let's get the derby cover off. Okay. Take our little spring clip here. And all that does is that just holds the position on your clutch adjustment. So that just sits in there. Anyway, I am going to, I guess from here, we'll just get this cable removed. to the takeoff bin. Okay, so with the clutch release mechanism and clutch cable out of the way, next thing I want to do is get the primary cover off. So got a couple of things we got to do here. Ha! Victory! Ooh, primary chain tensioner, definitely worn. It's a lot for only 20,000 miles. Right, try and give you a shot of that. Pretty good amount of wear in there. Anyway, so when I drained the fluid on here, the fluid looked pretty clean, but there was a lot of metal on the drain plugs. So I did have some questions about the condition we were going to find in here. So it's part of the reason I wanted to open this up, was to see if there's anything we were going to need to fix or replace or anything like that. So anyway, let me go find a place to put this down for the moment and get back to what we're doing over here. All right, well, with the cover off, we can see the bolts I wanted to get access to in order to get the starter off. Now, I'm not sure how well you can see it from the camera angle. Obviously, this bolt is no big deal. This one is definitely going to want to contact the teeth here on the starter ring gear. So, well, that's the starter. This is the ring gear on the clutch basket for the starter. We could definitely get it out without doing this, because I think what we do is if we take this bolt out first, we can unthread this and push the starter at the same time, then this bolt won't come back. That's one possibility. The other possibility is I could just take the clutch basket and, you know, compensator or whatever you call this on a Sportster, I don't know. I could just take this all off. I just don't know. I just don't know what makes sense to do and what doesn't at the particular moment. I'm just sort of thinking out loud here. I'm gonna take all this stuff off eventually. I just am not really ready to get in to start working on this, and I don't want a million pieces all flying around the shop while we sit and wait for this other stuff to get done, because this is going to be a project we kind of work on in between other things. So part of me thinks just leave it in place and just see if we can get the starter off without taking this apart, and then we'll deal with all this when I get to working on the rest of the motor. Or on the other hand, I could just take it off and put it all back on. That's a possibility too. I don't know. Let's see if we can get the starter out by itself, and then we'll see if I got to take this stuff out now. So let me just look and make sure I'm ready to go on this. So the only thing we got going on over here is there's a clip, I don't know if you remember it from the other side, holding these oil lines. So that's going to have to come off. But I wonder if, yeah, let me just take that off now. Then we'll be ready. All right. So, I do believe I should be able to do this. Let's see what happens. All right, there's one. And I gotta start this. And now the plan here is to pull, like I said, the starter motor back so the bolt doesn't come out. It just fell. Little alignment dowel. All right, well, that worked. I wonder if we can get this bolt out. Ha, look at that. Even got the bolt out around those teeth. Okay, well, that went about as well as possibly could. So here's our starter. And I can actually show you that one wire. I said I cut one wire when I was taking the harness out. I'll show you what that was. Right here. So I cut the harness here. Number one, because I was having trouble getting a hold of this plug to get it out, but also because I want to reuse this plug for the starter. We're not going to reuse the harness, so I could have made a new end for this, but just a lot easier rather than figuring that out to just cut this and then we can splice it into whatever we do for our new harness. So anyway, let me put this aside and well, we'll see what we got to do next. All right, well, we got what we needed to out of here, so I'm gonna go ahead and just temporarily reassemble all of this. I kind of wish I hadn't tossed the gasket because although it wouldn't, seal in a proper way anymore, probably would have helped to keep the little drips inside the motor, whereas now without the gasket, they're definitely it's gonna be kind of weeping onto the workbench for a while, but what are you gonna do? All right, cover back on, put the clutch release components back in place and put the debris cover back on. All right, we're good to go over here. Let's go to the other side. All right, so just a couple details to take care of over here. Obviously, you can see here why I wanted to get this starter out. Got quite a bit of dirt and grime and junk that would really just be nice to be able to get it all cleaned up. So we're gonna take care of that. The other thing is we've got our Speedo pickup here. This plugged into that harness up under the seat. This is gonna have to come out. I'm gonna have a block off plate for it because we're not gonna be running a Speedo. I don't have that yet, so I'm just gonna leave this in place for the moment, just because, why have an open hole if we don't have to, although I guess we have a giant one right there. So I guess it really doesn't make any difference. But the other thing we've got to take care of over here, let's move this stuff out of the way, is getting this sprocket off. So we just have to get these two quarter 20 cap heads out of the way, get the locking plate off, and then we can put the impact gun on here and get this big nut off. So let me grab those tools and we'll get to taking this off. Well, that was about as easy as you can hope for. That is usually a lot harder to do. All right, I'm gonna let's turn this back on, get the socket out of the thing there, and there it is. So now our sprocket should just slide off. Now, I did mention, obviously, the main reason I'm taking that off is because we are going to be running a chain sprocket on here, but I also wanted to be able to get a little bit of a visual inspection of the seal back here and make sure there was nothing we needed to clean. So for the moment, that is all we need to do here. Okay, so I went through here and just cleaned off, did an initial cleaning to get the grime out of here, and it actually looks really good just for an initial wipe down. I decided to pull that Speedo sensor and just put a piece of tape over it just so I could clean around it, and then I threw some tape over the hole for the starter as well. So next thing I want to do is start to get just a little bit more done here before we pull this motor. I was dealing with kind of the wiring harnesses. I got that Speedo one out. We've got the pickup for the neutral light here, just pulled that one off. This is the pickup for the alternator for the stator inside the primary. This is gonna stay here with the bike. I'm not gonna disconnect this one, so we'll just put it out of the way for the moment. And then the only other wiring harness I've got left, well, not the only one, but in this area, the only one, is this guy here, which is for the ignition. So we're not gonna be running the factory ignition on this bike, so no reason to leave this in place. We're gonna have to take it out eventually. Might as well do it now and not have another harness kind of dragging along that could get caught up. So all I did so far was just pull the cover off, and now we've got our studs here that hold the pickup in place. So the way this works is you're gonna have to de-pin this side of the harness so you can pull the wires out through this little hole. So start by doing that. And these Deutsch connectors are just about the easiest of all the connectors out there to de-pin. So enjoy that, because they're not all quite this easy. Okay, so then with that done, we can get these standoffs out. And we should be able to pull the pickup out of here. It's just a little tight. There we go. All right. Get those out. Put that aside. All right, so I think that is gonna be the last of the disassembly that we do before going ahead and start to disconnect these motor mounts and pulling this motor. So let me just double check and make sure I don't have anything else that's gotta get disconnected, and start getting this thing pulled. All right, let's get this motor out of here. So I mentioned before, we've got a rear mount, a top mount, an upper front, and 2 lower fronts down here, 1 on each side. So I've also got a jack set up under here. Not sure if that's in the frame or not. I put a little piece of 2x4 that I cut on the jack, so it's getting up under the motor. The idea behind that is, number one, I thought maybe it might be helpful in order to kind of get the motor to kind of move around a little bit if we need it, but more than that, I did it so that as we're undoing these motor mounts, we don't have all the pressure or all the weight of the motor just sitting on whatever the last mount is that we decide to take off, just so that the jack can support some of the weight. Don't want to put too much stress on the cases, particularly back here. I worry about, this mount. If you got the motor kind of like this and it's just connected back here, that it might want to do that, and you don't want to be breaking any castings. So I'm going to start with the upper mount here. This also has, you'll see it when it comes out, it's got the VOES still connected to it, so we get that out of the way, and that'll clear up that one last little thing. All right, so there's that bracket, there's the VOES, so you got the wires for it that are going to go to the ignition, and you got the vacuum line here. All right, and for what it's worth, what this is when the carburetor creates vacuum, which would be under load, this will send a signal to the ignition, which controls adjusting the advance curve, the spark advance. So that's what that's about. All right, let's put that aside. And then there's this little piece here, kind of like 2 welded nuts together that hold that on the back side. All right, so we're free there on the top. All right. So the next ones I want to do, let's do these lowers, I think. So we had this one bolt we took out already from here to get that clutch cable bracket out of there. So it looks like we got a couple more bolts on this side. So let me grab a socket and we'll start to get these removed, and we'll get both left and right side removed. All right, so we are left with the top mount here and the rear mount here. So I think I'm gonna do this top mount next. I don't know, maybe I'll loosen the rear and then we'll take the front. So we'll do it that way. These really weren't very tight. All right, so I got this one loose. We'll get this one loose here too. All right, and then got 2 more down here on the bottom. So get those at least started. Let's come up and do this front one now. All right, so motor's loose. So the last thing we're gonna have to do is get these bolts here, and then the motor will be totally free. And then I can show you over here. That cart is where I'm gonna be putting the motor. It's not what I bought this thing for. I just kind of bought it as like sort of a general utility tool cart, but according to, this comes from Viper, same place I got my crazy expensive chair. According to them, this thing is good for like, I don't know, 1,000+ pounds on it. And this motor certainly doesn't weigh that much. So I figured it'd be a good place to be able to have it sit, work on it, do whatever we need to do. I got this little tray and a pig mat here. I'm not sure if the motor's gonna fit in this properly or not, but I'm gonna give it a shot. So my plan here is I'm gonna unbolt this. It'd be nice to have a second set of hands for this part right here, but I don't. So I'm gonna try and do the best I can and hopefully not throw my back out. I'm gonna take the motor out, I believe, this way, so towards the primary side. So the idea is to pull it out this way and then just come over here, turn, and put it down onto this cart. So that's the plan. We'll see how it goes. Oh, because you got dowels. There we go. All right, forgot about that. So there are alignment dowels on the back here. So I was kind of putting that jack, I was lifting the whole bike, slid the motor forward, you could see it sort of pop right there. So now we are free, hopefully, to just pull this out. Wow. Not bad. Really couldn't have gone any better, I don't think. So this is here. I'm gonna have to figure out a way to stabilize this a little bit, but it fits. All right, well, that's gonna do it for part one of our Sporty Chopper build series. I wanted to get the disassembly done, have myself a roller that we could just stash in a corner of the shop, and have the motor free to work on, and we accomplished all of that. So I'm pretty pumped to move on to what's next. So to give you a little bit of a preview, there might be a little bit of a delay between parts on this series. Like I said, I think more than once. We're gonna, kind of work on this in between other things. The next piece of this project is gonna be, we have two things kind of simultaneous. The motor stuff has gotta happen, and getting started on the hardtail's gotta happen. I'm not sure which we're gonna do first. We need the motor assembled in order to get the hardtail aligned, so I can't do them at the same time. So we'll figure out the timing, decide what's gonna happen first. Don't know which that is yet, but we'll come back with either starting to work on the motor or getting this frame cut in half. Either way, I'm excited about it. Hope you guys are into this series. Like I said, it's something a little different than what we normally do, and also definitely not an area that's never been covered before on YouTube, but hey, we'll give it our own little flair. Most of the chopper videos you see on YouTube, I don't really think involve much motor work, Sportster ones anyway in particular, so hopefully this is a little different and something kind of cool. We'll give it the Iron Anchor flavor. So yeah, I guess that is gonna do it for this video, and hopefully we'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.